The theme for this morning is the new evangelization in family life. Ms. Helene Perrick and I were reflecting on what the theme for this year would be. As I said a minute ago, we thought we should focus on the preparation for the World Meeting of Families. But we wanted to integrate that theme also with the theme of the church evangelizing, the bishop's pastoral letter, and then try to also integrate those two pieces with social ministry. So hence we came up with the theme of the family and society, and the two sort of plenary sessions are going to be, first of all, on the family and the new evangelization or evangelization, and then secondly, we'll look at some of the challenges that families are facing in our culture today, especially for us here in the Diocese of Pittsburgh, and what is, how do we engage our families around those challenges and support them as the work of the new evangelization. So I want to begin, first of all, it's probably just a good idea to talk for a few minutes about the new evangelization. All right, we've been hearing about the new evangelization for, a long time. Really back into the early 80s. Pope John Paul II first started talking about the new evangelization, and he said that evangelization needs to be new in its ardor, its zeal, its methods, and in its expressions. Okay, this is what he gave us. And I think for about 20 years, we turned this over in our minds and wondered, what does this mean exactly? And I think as a church, we've been trying to wrap our minds around what the new evangelization is all about. And maybe it showed up on banners, and maybe it showed up in bulletins. But, as I've gone around the diocese and talked to folks, the question I keep getting is, what are we going to do about the new evangelization? What is it really? And so I just want to say a few things about that as a way of setting the context for the rest of the day. If you ask the question, what is new about the new evangelization? How does it differ from the old evangelization, or do we even want to make that distinction? And, I think that when the bishops gathered in their synod, and then Pope Francis, there were a couple documents that came out from that gathering a couple years back, and they wanted to affirm really three things about the new evangelization. Okay, three things. First of all, the new evangelization is the carrying forward of the church's mission to evangelize to the Gentiles, ad gentes, right, to the world. We are still very, very committed to bringing the gospel of Jesus Christ to those who have not heard it. And what has happened for many complicated reasons in the last 30 or 40 years since the Second Vatican Council is that we've kind of drifted away from a sense of the church's mission to the Gentiles. And part of that has to do with the culture of tolerance that has built up in our kind of postmodern secular world, where we don't want to be perceived as intolerant proselytizers that are trying to force people to believe in Jesus. And so what's happened is a lot of the church's missionary engagement, especially the social outreach, has been kind of emptied of the cross of Christ, if you will, if you use that language of St. Paul. A lot of mission work, okay, at least from a theological perspective, is, we don't want to bring the gospel with our social ministry because we don't want to look like we're trying to manipulate or coerce people into believing in Jesus by doing kind works of mercy for them. Okay, so all the way back into the pontificate of John Paul II, at the very early stages of his pontificate, he's been saying, the church has to reinvigorate her sense of mission, that Christ called us to go out and make disciples. Okay, disciples of Jesus Christ, and the works of mercy are an integral part of that mission. So the mission can't be reduced merely to its this world or its earthly or its temporal dimension, but we also have to integrate that spiritual and redemptive aspect of the work of the church's mission. So that theme was reaffirmed at the Synod. The second part of it is, how do we care and continue to give pastoral care for people who are actively engaged in the church? This is an integral part of evangelization, that we have to provide pastoral care for those people who are engaged in the church. But again, we have to look at the ardor and the methods and the expressions with which we are engaging the people that are actively involved in the church. We have to, there are new things that people are dealing with in our culture today, and new challenges from, the media to the kind of worldviews that are emerging in our culture today. And families in particular are beset with challenges that 40, 50 years ago, families did not face, at least with the same kind of intensity. And so we have to renew and redouble our efforts to provide effective pastoral care for those. So that was the second piece. The third piece is that we have a lot of people who have been baptized into the faith, but have not been adequately formed in their faith. And so they're not engaged, they're not practicing their faith, or they're involved with the church only on the margins. All right? And so the church is saying we have to, again, with new methods, ardor, and expression, we have to go out and figure out how to engage those people and help them to be better formed as disciples of Jesus Christ so that they can become active members of the church. So when we talk about the new evangelization, these are the three things that the church is asking us to do. And, I would say that for all of us in this room, all three of those things are relevant to the ministry we do, because within the context of a parish, we have to figure out, how do parish families engage globally? Okay. We have to ask, how are parishes engaging the pastoral needs of the faithful? And I'm going to focus a lot on that particular theme today. And then also, how are we trying to engage those who are kind of nominally involved with the church? And, even those who come to Mass, we have a lot of people who come to Mass who don't do much else besides that. Right? And one of the seeds I want to plant in all of your hearts today is, how can we engage those folks who are coming to Mass but not really, contributing to the life of the parish through some sort of engagement, ministry, apostolate of some kind? How can we engage them to become more deeply formed disciples of Christ who want to go out and bring the gospel to others? And I suspect that if we can facilitate a process of greater and deeper discernment of people's gifts within parishes, that we would find that there are a very, very large number of people who have a charism to serve in social ministry, but have never thought of themselves in those terms or never been asked. Okay? But there's a lot of work to do in terms of trying to unlock that potential. I liked Father Joe's image today from his homily about actuality and potential, right? All of you sitting in this room are actualized in your commitment to social engagement and social outreach. That's why you're here. That's why you're serving in the capacities that you are. But how can we as a diocese unlock that potential for lots of other people who might be sort of hanging out on the margins of engagement, involvement, and build up what could in the end turn out to be an army of people who can go out and serve in the area of the works of mercy and providing pastoral support to the people not only in our parishes but in our community. So that's really, that's the first thing I want to say about the new evangelization is, this is what it really entails. Now, in terms of asking ourselves, well, what is evangelization itself? And as Catholics, sometimes we can feel a little uncomfortable with what evangelization means. And, we might conjure up images of people who are trying to force their ideas and impose their ideas on other people, pressuring them, using coercive and manipulative tactics to try to, get people. Some people have this image of evangelization, or being overly preachy, and so forth. But, there's a couple of concepts that I want to present here in terms of evangelization that I think is particularly relevant to the work that you all are doing. And the first is that of witness. What does it mean to be a witness? Okay. Bishop Zubik speaks about the importance of friendship. Okay, and Pope Paul VI, in his encyclical Evangelii Nuntiandi, he talks about the importance of being a witness. That is, the witness of an authentically integrated Christian life. When we really live fully the gospel, we put a light out into the world that attracts, people. And in the context of friendship and in the context of relationship, as we begin to build relationships with people and lay the foundation of trust, it opens the hearts of other people up to, as St. Peter says, the reason for our hope. Why are we the way we are? Why do we give the way we do? Why do we engage people? Why do we walk with people? Why are we willing to carry and shoulder people's burdens with them? Why are we able and willing to enter into the suffering of our brothers and sisters? Why is that? Is it because we're a Democrat or a Republican? Well, I hope not. I hope it's because we're followers of Jesus Christ. Because we love God and we know that God loves us, and we can't imagine a life where we're not sharing that love with other people. And as we're sharing that love with other people, in that very unconditional, detached way, where we don't have agendas, but we just want to be there, people begin to wonder, why are you the way you are? And that raises the question that we can begin answering. Oftentimes we as Catholics, we want to give answers to questions that people haven't yet asked. Okay, but what we need to do is we need to create the conditions of curiosity for people to want to understand that love more deeply. Because that's the reason that we do what we do as Christian people. That's what inspires and motivates us. That we have first been loved by the Lord, and we know that love intimately, and we want to share that love with other people. And when we witness to other people, what we're doing simply is sharing what the Lord is doing within our lives with other people. Because we realize that work that the Lord is doing is a common good. It's a good that's meant to be shared by many, by all. Okay? It's not my own private thing. I have my little private relationship with God. No, the work that God is doing within each one of us is a common good. It's a good to be shared with other people, but we have to be the kind of people that can create the conditions of curiosity. And we do that by our love. We do that by our dedicated commitment and service to other people. And this leads to the second theme that I think is really important and relevant, and that is the theme of encounter. We hear this theme all the time throughout all of the church's documents on mission. That what we as Christian people are called to do is to be people who cultivate encounters with Christ. I always love thinking about Mother Teresa's own understanding of this. As she kind of matured in her own sense of mission, what the Lord showed her in her own spiritual life is that there were two thirsts that he wanted to satiate each other. Okay? The first thirst was his thirst for souls. His thirst for people to know his love for them. Okay? And then there's her thirst. Her thirst for love. Her thirst for God. And what the Lord showed Mother Teresa is that when she went and served the poorest of the poor, her thirst was encountering his. So it was Christ encountering Christ. That was the essential meaning of her mission. And as Christian people, this is what we are called to do. Okay, we have to first encounter Christ in our own life and know him intimately so that we can become places of encounter with Christ for other people. And we do that by that mission, that vocation of charity. First entering into the divine love, abandoning ourselves to the Lord's love, and then bringing that love to other people and being the place, the space where people can encounter the love of Jesus Christ and find therein their own salvation and redemption, their own calling and vocation as a child of God. So does this make sense? The new evangelization, hopefully this connects the work of evangelization and mission with the work of social ministry. Okay, social ministry is not merely social work. We're not simply serving the body. More importantly, we have to serve that thirst, that spiritual hunger and thirst within souls to be loved, to know that they are loved, to know that they are children of God. And we do that in and through the care and the support that we provide for them. Okay. Now, as I'd like to shift now and start talking about the theme of the family and evangelization. Okay? And I would articulate it this way. There's two remaining points I want to address. One is the mission of families. The mission of families. And then there's also the mission to families. Okay, so I want to first talk about the mission of families. What does family life have to do with the church's mission? And where I would begin here is to say that the church teaches us that the family is supposed to be the place where people first encounter Christ. The family is the place where people are first to encounter Christ. And so it's really important for them, or for parents especially, to be witnesses of the work that God is doing within their lives. And secondly, to create an environment within their homes where everyone in that household can encounter Christ. Okay? And of course, this is a huge challenge. It's a challenge for many reasons, which in the second talk after lunch, we'll sort of begin to unpack some of those challenges that families face in being both a witness to and a place of encounter with Christ. Okay. So the first thing I would like to say in terms of, parents being witnesses is how important it is to encourage our parents to share their faith with their children on a personal level. How many people were at Sherry Waddell's workshop? Okay. You remember she spoke about how as Catholics we have created a culture of silence. we are not comfortable, it would seem, as a church, sharing our faith with each other. It's just an uncomfortable place for us to go. How do we talk about our faith? Okay. And the challenge is, for us, first and foremost, is are we in touch ourselves with what the Lord is doing within our hearts? You know, we as Catholics are really good at focusing on the external practices of our faith, what we are doing, right? And that, you can go across the entire theological spectrum, right? You know, the left and right divide that we can experience in the church. So, you know, there's on one side the social justice crowd that wants to do this, the engagement with economic problems and different forms of exploitation that are going on in the world, and environmentalism and women's rights. On the other side of the spectrum, you have the doing of the pro-life group, the unborn, okay, the end-of-life issues. It's a false dichotomy, okay? Hopefully we all realize that now, that we have to operate with a complete, integrated picture of social engagement that involves all of those issues. But here's the sticking question. Do we as Catholics think about what we are undergoing personally and interiorly with respect to the life of grace that's operating within us? How could we become effective instruments of the Lord if we're not aware of how He's trying to grow us on the inside? Okay? And so this question of formation becomes really, really important. Okay? In the context of the home, okay, I know, like, if I reflect on my own experience, my parents were very good at explaining the faith. And they made sure I went to Catholic school and I got all of the information, right? I was taught the doctrines of the church. I was taught the commandments. But the one thing I did not understand, because it was never really shared with me until I got older and started asking and probing. What is your own personal relationship with the Lord, Mom? Dad? What experiences have you undergone that have helped you grow as a follower of Jesus Christ? And you know, I remember breaching some of those questions in my late 20s into my 30s, and the answer was, I don't know, I've never really thought about that. And all my siblings, we've been, you know, my mom has passed on, but my dad, working on my dad, you know, that personal relationship dimension. So one of the things that's challenging in family lives, you know, in terms of evangelization, is how do we encourage our people to first be in touch with how the Lord is forming them within. Where is He present within the interior landscape of the soul? And then how can we help parents in particular begin to share that experience with their children so that children can begin to perceive that faith is a living reality in the life of the home? Okay, so in relation to that witness part, there's also the encounter part. That's the other side of it. How do we as families, okay, how do we create a culture of encounter within our homes? And of course, there's lots of practical things that this implies. One of the most basic is just spending time together. This itself seems to be a challenge today for families, just to be together around a family table. Okay? And I'll talk more about that this afternoon. But the family is the first place of encounter with Christ. And again, to focus on these two themes of witness and encounter, you know, how can we engage our families to move in the direction of becoming more comfortable first with being witnesses? And to be a witness, one has to have a sense of how the Lord is working interiorly. I remember, just to share, I remember an experience I had. I was frustrated in my own prayer life when I was in graduate school. And I went to a priest, a good priest who was starting to kind of do some spiritual direction with me. And I remember I'd say, when I would go before the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, I don't know, I was busy, like this doing. I was busy with all these words. And he finally said to me, just be quiet. Stop talking. The Lord knows what's on your heart. Just be with him. And allow, he said, the image, he said, just exhale into the Lord's face. And let him inhale all that you have to give him, and then breathe his Spirit back into your soul. I like that image because it meant I could just sit there and I could just allow the divine physician to go to work on me without trying to orchestrate the treatment. Okay? When we begin to cultivate this sense of interiority, we begin to discern how the Lord wants us to serve and how the Lord wants us to engage. And we also have something we can share. I know what the Lord is doing in my life. It's interesting as I stand here and say this to you, I feel convicted as a parent because my kids are getting to be teenagers, and I've done a lot of catechesis with my kids. But I was sitting in Sherry Waddell's workshop and asking myself, have I cultivated a culture of silence in my home in terms of we don't talk about the personal side of things, we're just pushing out information all the time? And I kind of felt convicted, I think I need to do a better job of opening up my heart to my children so they understand that my relationship with Jesus is deeply personal. And sharing with my children, how do you engage and talk with God? How do you learn to listen to God? Instead of, here are the teachings and the commandments of the church. Not that we don't do that, but how do we cultivate that culture of encounter in the home? Okay. Now, the second thing I wanted to address is the need to evangelize families. That is the mission to families. Okay? If we step back and we think of a home as a house of formation, it's a house of formation. How do we as the church, as parishes, how do we encourage our families to see their vocation in terms of being houses of formation? Okay? And there are some simple ways that we can do this, but we are up against, I think, some huge obstacles. Right? So, some ways that we can do this, first of all, is getting families to pray together. Okay? When we moved here this summer, it's the second year that we've had 4 kids in sports at the same time. And, talk about being drawn and quartered. When school started, I think we went 2 or 3 weeks without having a single meal together or sitting down and having family prayer together for the first time ever in our family life. And why? Because all the sporting events were right in the middle of the dinner hour. Now, when I was growing up, we were done by 5:30. And we went home and we had dinner and we did family prayer in the morning before school started, but at any rate. But somehow we have to engage our families with the importance of praying together. It's like breathing and eating. Right? We have to pray together because that's the beginning of cultivating an interior life within the home, within children. Another thing that's very simple to do is to cultivate the celebration of the liturgical life of the church in the home. Being explicit and intentional about this. What does Advent mean to us? I would suspect in most households they're already celebrating Christmas and Advent. And when you get into the Christmas season, they're already getting ready for Valentine's Day. So one of the most formative things that families can do is to really enter into the spirit of the liturgical season. And there are many, many ways that can be very formative for children. So, we can decorate the house to reflect the liturgical life of the church. What does Lent mean to us? What does Easter mean to us? What does ordinary time mean to us? How do we sensibly enter into that reality? How do we prayerfully enter into that reality? So liturgical seasons is a wonderful way to build a culture in the home that's formative of that interior life. Okay. I remember when my children were younger, we used to read we had this kind of children's version of the Lives of the Saints that's put out by Paulus Press. And I'd say for probably 5 to 7 years, we would read the life of a saint in that day. And one of the reasons why I like this resource is that it really sort of presented the saints as just real human beings that you could relate to, rather than what I call sort of the billboard saint. And the billboard saint is, the saint that is kind of reduced to their external practices of piety, and you don't have any sense of their personality. Well, somehow this resource kind of dipped a little bit into the personality and into the sense of mission that each of these saints had. Well, it was really interesting just the other day. Yeah. I don't. Paulus Press, though, it's like 2 volumes, The Saints in a Year, something like that. And it was probably pitched for like the 7 to 10-year-old, 7 to 12-year-old kind of brag. So real little people didn't, follow that. But we just did it, and because you have kids at different ages. But the what was really interesting is my oldest son has been a little bit, he's 16 and he's just tired of the drill kind of thing. And so we kind of had it out the other day. It's like, we try to pray and we're always waiting for you, and then when you want to pray, you're not really engaging. And he got really upset. And he's like, why can't we read about the lives of the saints or something that gives me something to think about? And it was really weird the way he said it, because the way he said it indicated to me that he had no recollection that we used to do this, but somehow this was deeply embedded into his subconscious, that this was because he loves stories and he loves reading. He just inhaled books as a child, and so he was part of the reason why we were doing this every day, because we could read these stories to them, and these stories came alive for him. And so it was like I stepped back, and it really struck me, because I thought, wow, this really impacted him. And he doesn't even realize how much it impacted him, because all of this is operating in his subconscious because of what we did when he was younger. And we stopped doing it years ago because we had done it so many times. We kind of figured they were kind of bored. I think it's a good time to rekindle it, because my younger kids haven't been through that experience of walking through the year with the saints. But at any rate, there's different practices that we can do to try to help connect children with that deeper interior sense that, hey, God is calling you. God has something in mind for you. What are your gifts? What are your vocation? How does the Lord want you to serve him? And this really deals with kind of the third point under, seeing the house as a place of formation. Okay, family, prayer, liturgical seasons, but that moral and spiritual formation of children. I think as parents, parents have to be very, very careful about what they feed their children or what they allow their children to ingest. Okay? Because it's formative of them. Okay? And to create a kind of an experience where what children are exposed to are things which are really beautiful and true and good and uplifting. Again, I'm sharing, from my own experience, not that all of your experience is the same, but it's the experience I know best is my own as a parent. But one of the things I had another, with my oldest son, they went to a dance recently, and there was some inappropriate stuff going on at the dance, and he got into the car afterwards, and I said, well, how was it? And his response is, well, I don't know, it wasn't great. Well, what happened? He's like, well, I don't know, it was kind of like just soft porn the whole night. And I thought to myself, my reaction was, wow, I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of you because you're sensitized to the inappropriate. Okay? That's formation. So how are we creating a climate or a culture within our homes that forms our children to become sensitized to the things that are really good and not desensitized to the things that are not good? Yeah, question.
That's really a good point, because so much is put to these kids today subliminally, if I'm saying it right, you know what I mean? So he felt that, which was probably happening.
Right. And I mean, we're not a foolproof filter in our home. I mean, it's impossible to keep the world out. But we're always engaging the kids on these things, What do you think of that song? Have you listened to the lyrics? What are they saying? Why do you like the beat of that music? Where does the beat live? Where does it reside? And raising their questions, engaging with our children and trying to help form that interior life is so critical, because as they mature and grow, then they come to know who they are in Christ, and they are empowered to be able to go out and engage the world without, on the one hand, just being swept away by it, or on the other hand, just saying, I don't want to have anything to do with the world. All right? So we need to evangelize parents and families about the importance of the culture that exists within their homes. That's my point. As a parish community, how do we do that? These are questions, and in a few minutes here, I'll open up some opportunity for discussion, because I want to discuss these things. Okay? So let me just sort of close this opening session with thinking about this very important idea that the church gives to us, is that the family is the first cell of society. It's the first cell of society. Now let's employ the cancer metaphor. Right? When we treat cancer, we're not treating atoms. We're treating cells. And cells are a complex reality. And the family is a complex reality. But what do we know about cancer cells? Cancer cells sort of take over the body. They multiply and grow erratically. They're not integrated. That's the problem. Like when you get a tumor, you get a whole bunch of earlobe cells, in your lymph nodes or whatever. Like, and they don't belong there. Okay. As families, if we think about the family as the first cell of society, we think, okay, well, what does that mean? What that means is that a healthy society depends upon healthy families. If we have healthy families that are well formed, then we will, by default, build up a healthy society. And so as a church, we should step back and say, we need to put a lot of energy into building up and supporting the family. In fact, we could put most of our energy there. If most of our energy was put towards really building up and strengthening and stabilizing and forming the family, then all sorts of wonderful things would happen without us having to plan or program it. You know, look out at society. We have a lot of broken marriages we see out in society. And so often we're doing damage control by dealing with fallout. But as a society, we put very little resources in to helping people succeed in marriage and helping families stay together. We usually put all of our resources into the aftermath of, when it breaks down. Now we put all our resources to it. Why are we not putting all of those resources and energy into stabilizing and strengthening families up front? Okay, that's a much better plan. All of humanity passes through the family. You don't come into the world except through some configuration of family. Okay? And your formation as a human being, your integral human development, is so dependent upon the health of your family. And we know that when families break down, so do individuals. But if we just are treating the individuals and not treating the social context that forms them, then it's sort of we're not working in a very sensible way. All right. I don't know if you've ever heard of Rodney Stark. He's a sociologist and historian at the University of Washington. At least he used to be there. And he wrote a book called The Rise of Christianity. And he wanted to find out why the Christian movement was so effective and so it spread so quickly and so successfully. How did this happen? He was somewhat of an agnostic observer too. He himself was not a convicted believer. He just was curious as a scholar. But what he found, the conclusion of his book, is that it was the Christian family. The Christian family was so unique and so different. He said, first and foremost, it was how Christians honored the marriage bed. And the second thing he noted was it was because of how Christian families took care of each other and how they took care of everyone else. Okay. If you go back to the Acts of the Apostles, it's really interesting because many of the conversions that we hear explained in the Acts of the Apostles are the conversion of families, households that came over to the Lord. Think of the prison guard. He and his whole household became believers that day. And the households of the Lord would come before the apostles and lay their resources before the apostles to be distributed to other households according to need, and so on. Okay. So I think to end this first session, to think about the family, the need for families to be places of encounter with Christ, the first place of evangelization for our people. For the importance of the parish to engage families with that message, the need to evangelize families themselves so that they can realize their vocation, because they are the first cell of society. And if we don't build up the family and help the family become stronger and more stable, as the family goes, so goes the society.